This is Carrie Fox. It is November 26th, 2019, and I am interviewing Jessica Martinez-Brooks, and we will get started. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up when you were a young kid.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the south side of Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, we mostly stayed, in fact, always on the south side of Oklahoma City. My mom went to U.S. Grant High School. My dad went to Southeast High School. My mom dropped out before she graduated, had me.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad did graduate from Southeast High School. So my grandma and grandpa lived over by Crossroads Mall, well, old Crossroads Mall. So that was the place where I called home a lot of the times. My mom is white and my dad is Mexican American. So my great grandparents were from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, I spent a lot of time at my grandma and grandpa's house. And my grandma at that time was running La Puerta de Oro, which is the Spanish-speaking senior citizen center,
Mm-hmm.
which used to be through Salvation Army. And she had a center over on South Robinson. It was kind of one building that was split between the Latinos and the Native Americans. And so they had one side of the facility, and my grandma and grandpa helped raise the other side. And so I kind of grew up there, especially in the summer times when we were out of school, just serving coffee and talking with the ladies. And it was mostly ladies that came to the center. Their husbands had passed. And so I watched them do everything from quilting to making food. At that time, before kind of nutrition took over, they would still make traditional Mexican food. So we would have enchiladas, we would have tamales, we would have tacos. And then kind of what was funny is I would always laugh, and when the people would come in to talk about healthy eating habits and, the use of garlic as a wonderful, and they're like, please don't talk to us about how to use garlic. And they're like, will you translate this? My grandma would always talk to the ladies in Spanish, but what was interesting to me, just growing up on the south side, was how quickly the south side became almost a hub for the growing, particularly Mexican population. So most of my people are Mexican, of Mexican descent. And I remember as a little kid, my great grandpa, who's in this picture over here, helping to take care of him. He had a house over there off of Southwest 5th, right across from like the postal center. And it was right next to the old mission, that yellow building, which is, I think, now Scissortail Park. So, and we used to spend a lot of our summers there with my Aunt Bernie, and we would help take care of him. He lived to be, I think, 104, 103, and really only got sick after he was 98. He was chopping down a tree in the front yard.
Yeah.
Rode his bike everywhere. It was a little house. Like, there wasn't much around there besides warehouses and old vacant lots. And so this was back in the 80s. And he would have corn out front and chickens in the back, and in the middle of the city, right, and practically downtown. So we kind of grew up there as well a little bit, but started out also going to school at Stan Wadey, which used to be, or I guess now Mary Golda Ross. And then we moved around quite a bit after my parents divorced, so we lived a little bit everywhere.
Always the south side, though?
Always the south side.
Okay.
sometimes into more, but always South Side. And we'd stay with my grandma and grandpa quite a lot. My parents divorced after my brother was born, so we had a lot of just time with them. I remember being very little. My grandma had a food stand at the fair, and she sold tostadas and just different kinds of food, mostly Tex-Mex type food that people, loved and appreciated at that time. And so, we would all take turns working at the fair. But I was little. And I think I have some of those photos of me being in a pool. It was hot, but we all kind of pitched in to make it work. That seemed to be just kind of an annual event that we used to do. And then my grandma helped start, or really kind of brought to fruition, the idea of serving Spanish-speaking elderly, trying to get more people out of their house instead of just sitting and babysitting the grandkids. She kind of used it as a time to get together, to sing, dance, and to me it brought in this new appreciation for generations that have lived before me and the culture that was so apparent in their everyday lives that they typically didn't see when they got here. So a lot of the times their children brought them up from Mexico, and they were new, and there wasn't too many people that spoke Spanish around, and
so it was isolating.
It was. And she allowed them to celebrate their culture in a place that they felt comfortable with other people who spoke Spanish. And it was important because I think for my grandma and grandpa especially, they didn't teach any of their kids to speak Spanish because they didn't want them to be discriminated against. They saw a lot of those comments whenever they would speak Spanish in public. I would go out with them and they would be speaking Spanish. And I specifically remember being on a restaurant on South Shields and a couple coming over here, you need to learn how to speak English if you're going to be in America. And
of course, you were a child?
Yes. Okay. And of course they spoke English, but they didn't bother to stop and talk to them. But at that time, there was just this need, especially for my dads and my aunts, that generation, this need to assimilate to the culture of Oklahoma. There was very few Latinos around back then. I remember graduating from Westmore High School back in the mid-90s, and there were not too many Latinos in my class or in the school. I kind of joke, I was like, there was 5 of us, I think, and it was me and my brother and the Echeverria twins out of a class of, 800. So I don't...
About when did you graduate?
95. I graduated high school in 95.
See, that's the thing. You, an observer right now would go and look and be like, what do you mean? There was only 4 people at Westmore who were of Hispanic heritage. That would be a total surprise.
Right.
And so I'm really interested in that part of it, comparing your experiences to the experiences of a child now who's going in and has some supports that I think that you probably did not have.
Especially in Oklahoma City public schools where the majority is Latino, just in the district-wide. I mean, I would have never thought to have seen a mariachi music program, and they have these great, beautiful programs now that are teaching mariachi culture. And I remember being at one of my elementary schools, and I was in Moore at that time. And my grandma, they had asked, I think it was for Grandparents' Day or something like that, and my grandma and grandpa coming to perform with their group called Los Viejitos. And they have a group that performed all over. And me being like one of the only ones that had, an easy last name, Martinez or Gonzalez or Rodriguez. I mean, I was the only one in that school. I was super embarrassed. I remember I was crying, and my teacher was like, "What's the matter?" And I was like, they're going to make fun of me, this is my grandma. And, the thought of people thinking differently of me was something that you're not different. I'm just like you, I may have a little darker color complexion, and half my teachers called my last name Martinez, and I never corrected them.
Yeah.
But I would simply, there was just a culture shift from that time to what you see today, where it is the more common minority, if it is a minority in schools. So just the growth that the Latino community had from the 90s to today has been huge. And to me, it's done my heart good, because when you're the only lonely person and you have that only lonely syndrome of, I don't think it's okay to be different, and I don't think it's okay to have different experiences. I don't want to talk about tamales that we have at Christmas Eve. I eat, ham just like everybody else. It wasn't until you get like that sense of self with others around you and you feel comfortable exploring.
Would you say like a sense of connectedness?
Yeah. Just that, I don't want to be different just because I'm different. I want to be different because it's valued, and you think that what I have to say really matters, and you just didn't have that back then. There wasn't the inclusion efforts that you see in a lot of public schools right now, in higher education. So it was just a different kind of time.
You were very aware that you came from a background that was different than your fellow classmates on the whole, and your teachers. Do you feel like they noticed a lot, if that makes any sense at all? You're very aware of it, but looking back, were they cognizant of that fact?
I don't know. I really don't. I will say that there was probably somebody that reached out to either my parents or my grandparents to bring them in for that day, right? So I don't know if I was the one. It's been so long.
Right. And you were a kid too.
And I was very little. It was elementary school. But, maybe there was some real effort there to bring in some cultural diversity to the school, and knowing that there was not a lot of people that looked like me. And maybe it was, I don't even know if Hispanic Heritage Month was a thing back then. I don't think it was. So maybe it was for Cinco de Mayo or something. I don't know. But to me, there just wasn't a lot of people that looked like me and my brother that went to our schools. So, and thinking back, I tried to assimilate so much into just the mainstream culture that I don't know if it was my insecurities or if it was something that was placed on me by, teachers. I don't know how that came to be. But I do know that I always felt really good when I was with my grandma. And, when we're going out to places and people knew her, they, kind of treated her like the godmother of the Latino community, and especially in Oklahoma City. And just because she was able to bring so many like-minded people together, people that shared the same culture and backgrounds, to where she knew that people needed, it's almost like, you need that community, and you need to be able to converse, and she was able to help build that community. And so when you lack that ability to really talk to somebody who understands, and I had never really met anybody who was from a white mom and a Latino dad. To me, so that was different, right? Because I could still, I understand, my mom didn't want me to speak Spanish either, because she didn't want me to be confused, because my grandma was speaking Spanish to me whenever she would watch us. And so I'd never, most of the people that I did know, they did speak a lot of Spanish. It was their first language sometimes growing up. Both of their parents came from, they were of Mexican descent. And so there wasn't too many people from almost an interracial marriage that I could relate to until I actually met my husband, whose mom is Mexican American and his dad is white. And so we kind of shared that same history of growing up and being able to be in both worlds. So I know how to function in this mainstream majority white, culture, and I can also come over here and work in the Latino culture at the same time. And so, it wasn't until much later that I saw that as a positive and not just having to shut off one side of me and then turn over here and look something different.
What I marvel at a little bit is your grandmother's foresight in taking you to the center.
Yeah.
Because she probably knew exactly what she was doing, but you got all she probably wanted to give you in that way by learning and being around the older generation. And you brought them, I'm sure, joy by being there. But that's pretty insightful on her part. And so I think my next question, what were your interests as a kid? I mean, this is going on and it's challenging and everything, but that's not the whole you. You obviously did a lot of stuff. So let's talk a little bit about what you like to do and what you were interested in.
Whenever I was in high school, actually junior high, I found my way to writing. And so my grandma always encouraged me my grandma never thought that she was an educated individual. She dropped out of school after the 6th grade to translate for her dad, who was a migrant farm worker working the beet harvest. So it was part of her job to go make sure that people got paid at the end of the week because she could speak to the farmer in English and back and forth. So after, and I know she tried to go back and get her GED and was taking classes while she was at the center. But I say that because, there were times where she was running a senior citizen center, so people were passing away. Families would ask her to go and speak on, about their their loved one who had just recently died, and she would always like, Madre, would you write something for me? I'm like, Grandma, you have a wonderful, you can tell stories better than anybody, and I would, it was constant. She's like, yes, but you write so well. You write so well. And to me, having somebody that you thought hung the sun and the moon and the stars and coming and telling me that I wrote well, that just kind of encouraged me to continue through that process. So I always worked on the yearbook, and I was editor of the high school yearbook at Westmore. I graduated from Westmore and that year, and then I went and majored in journalism.
Okay.
For my undergrad. So
you just stayed engaged with the written word from the time you were in middle school.
I did.
That is amazing. And so what made you passionate about it? Was it you expressing yourself? Was it being able to tell a story? That's a theme that comes up again, isn't it? So
I think I was always impressed with my grandparents' ability to tell stories and to tell funny stories. Not only just specifically about things that have happened in the family, but I felt like my family was always a group of entertainers, whether they were on stage, whether they were talking in a group of just people that they saw in a restaurant, right? I felt like they kind of captivated an audience at some point. And so I like to write stories about, my grandpa, and I like to write stories about just everyday things that I would see happening. I remember writing one story, me and my brother playing in the backyard, and my grandma saying we would walk to Crossroads because she didn't drive. So we would walk over there, do some shopping, and at that point she had surgery on her feet. And so she was kind of hobbling around. She was ready to go. And me and my brother, we kind of hid from her, right? And so then we got lost, and we had to go talk to a policeman to find our grandma. And she has sore feet. And so we're telling the story, right? And my grandma thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I remember going back and just writing stories to tell about our everyday adventures. Even my aunt that's coming in later, she would, I now go back and write stories about, we didn't have money to go to camp. All the rest of the kids that I knew, especially growing up in more public schools, And my mom actually lied about our address so we could continue going to the same school because we had moved all over. But those kids had money, and we were, lucky to be picked up on time from school.
Yes.
And my grandpa made that happen as well because my mom was working full time. So I would tell stories and my grandpa had an old typewriter that I remember, and at the center sometimes I would just sit and start typing stories out.
Yes.
And it was just a way to kind of escape, and especially when you grow up super poor, you're always thinking about what life could be like if you had resources available and where you could go. I had never been on an airplane until I was 19, when I went on a study abroad trip that my grandma made sure I went on, to Mexico, which is where I met my husband.
Imagine.
Right?
Because he's from Oklahoma.
Right. Oh, our grandma and grandpa, my grandma and grandpa and his grandma and grandpa grew up next to each other. They were family friends. So my grandpa used to change his mom's diapers. And it's a very close-knit community if you talk about, those that have been here for 3-4 generations now.
I would think it would almost have to be.
Yeah.
Because the people that don't want to be a part of the community, they probably go on.
Yeah.
But once you're in, then you are deeply connected.
Right. And I'm looking at these pictures and I'm like, who is that person? I think I know him. Who is this person?
Yes.
I think I know him. And it's just because it was so close knit. Everybody seemed to know. There was just there weren't too many of us around. Right. So we kind of knew everybody.
Yeah.
Who taught the folkloric groups and who ran the radio station. And
so it sounds like cultivating and celebrating culture was central to one of the goals of the community. And how was that achieved? Your grandmother did a lot by working with senior citizens. I know that she worked to facilitate getting that history down.
Yeah.
But what are some things that other people would do? The dancers.
The Little Flower Festival.
Yes.
I mean, that was a huge celebration that we all took. I mean, you can probably talk to any of the original Mexicano families that were there in Walnut Grove, which is now the boat houses. Those families who grew up, we all centered around going to either you went to church there, or you went to the festival, or you had a booth at the festival. I mean, that was truly a celebration of Latino culture.
Everyone participated.
It did, and it's been an ongoing thing for generations now.
Did the wider community participate in that, or was it more?
I think it was mostly the Latino people that were there. I didn't see too many white people growing up there. But I think now they do.
Yeah.
I think people recognize it, and they recognize the quality of food that's there. They see the culture, the celebration. So you didn't really see too many people from white mainstream culture almost associating whatsoever with Latinos. I say that, my mom being white, and there were those cases, but I think, when this picture makes me laugh because that's one of the things that I remember most about Little Flower is having the eggs and the confetti and chasing everybody around Little Flower with the confetti eggs. And I don't think it was until probably the 90s, late 90s, early mid 90s probably, where I think mainstream white culture started recognizing the growth and thinking, oh, we need to incorporate this voice in some of the things that we're doing. And I'll give you an example, like Leadership Oklahoma City.
Okay.
So they would come to my grandma's center and have lunch during their Health and Human Services Day.
Yeah.
And I think, my grandma connected to people outside of the Latino culture a lot through food, a lot through music, and her group and the folkloric songs that they would traditionally sing. And people, can engage on that in a very
Of course.
nice, light level,
Yes.
right? So there were no major policy discussions happening,
Right.
She wasn't brought to the table to talk about aging services too much, although later on she was.
Uh-huh.
But initially, that's kind of how she made the inroads to a lot of that community. And what I have seen happen since the two generations, we have more Latino elected officials, we have more people being represented when they're making major policy decisions. So I have seen in this, probably starting with my dad and my aunt's generation, all the way until right now, I think people start to see just the contributions that culture is making, and not only just culturally through food and music and things like that, but what it looks like in the schools and what entrepreneurship looks like for economic development. Because when I look at Southwest 29th right now, you had Grinders right there. That area was traditionally more like white, affluent. It was the Capitol Hill,
right?
And it's kind of done this different change, to be focused on Latino entrepreneurs who are opening their own businesses, grocery stores that now have predominantly, different types of foods that really cater to the Latino community. Supermercado Morelos and Buy for Less, and what they sell there really reflects the culture of the customers that they're trying. You didn't see that back then.
And at the same time, isn't it true that for a period of time, Capitol Hill was really neglected as far as like supporting and fostering businesses, or
there was nothing there. It was a ghost town after like Langston's closed, and it was just nothing.
And then it was the Latino community that came in
that started opening the businesses.
Yes.
And it's not Randy King owns probably a significant amount of property down there.
Yeah.
But now we're back to who's coming in and fixing it up and making it almost a nice space on the south side. When you had OCCC come through and start their renovations, Community Action Agency, DHS came down.
The
library, all of these, and those are more social services, education services, nonprofit. And I think until you, and right now we have a lot of businesses that are coming in there and renovating. So you have the architects that are in the old Capitol Hill Savings. They've renovated that whole facade to where people are trying to keep in mind the spirit of what that district looked like back in the day, when it was like OCCC was really mindful of keeping the look of it used to be the old Katz drugstore.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So, they were mindful of that facade and what it looked like, and tried to keep that in the architecture. And the same thing with a lot of the different groups down there. Like Steve Mason now has the Yale Theater and has really made it look, that he kept the old projector that's up there. And I just see people investing now in the buildings and investing in the community to make it this appealing and a place where we're all proud to be in, and whether we're Coney Island with the hot dogs that has been there forever, or the new great Yale Theater that he has invested millions of dollars in to renovate, or OCCC who's offering the educational component, or DHS that may be assisting families on the edge. That I've found that district has been able to pull together a diverse group of audiences to kind of serve the community in a broader perspective. So I forgot what your question was.
Well, so
sorry.
You do have a meeting coming up shortly, but what I would like to maybe take a look at a little bit is talking about your young adult life, going through college. That must have been, it doesn't sound like maybe you came from a college-going family.
No.
And so that must have been very different for you. And then kind of if you could comment on kind of the way I see you, you know, because you've worked with a lot of my students, and I know that you're an important part of the community. It seems like to me you are kind of a pillar in the same way that your grandma was, by bringing people together and building. And so just speaking about that transition from somebody who kind of grew and then starts to contribute out. And
well, I don't think anybody has said more kinder words to me, so thank you. Because that means a lot, because she meant the world to
but
me.
you see the parallels, right?
I've seen it.
Okay.
I mean, I have my grandma way up here on a pedestal,
Yes.
and I don't think there's anybody or anything that I could ever do that would compare to the struggles that she went through,
Yes.
and the hardships that she had to endure, and, you know, the waiting tables at one point, and then starting, you know, I see her way up here. So I appreciate, and I'm very thankful of that people would hold me in the same light. And, you know, for me, going to college was a big part of, you know, she always told me, you were going to go to college. You know,
did she tell your brother that as well, or was it
I don't think
Jessica?
her and my brother had the same relationship as she and I did.
Yes.
And they were close, but my grandma always instilled in me that you will be in college and you will go. You are smart, you are capable. I remember one time she was like, you've outpassed me. And this was after I graduated from high school, right? So, and my mom had dropped out of Grant. So, and my aunt, she graduated from the old Central High School downtown, which is the OCU Law School now, I think. But nobody had gone to college. And so I came senior year, and people are, you know, applying to these great big colleges that I've never even heard of. And I just knew I wanted to go to college. And my mom...
But no idea how.
No idea how. And my mom came through and she's like, you need to get a scholarship because we have absolutely no money for college.
Yes.
Or you join the military because that's the only other way I know how to pay for college. And so pick your poison. So I was like, I'm going to work on getting those scholarships, right? So, and I did that. I kept it like a full-time job my senior year, and I was already working part-time at a local restaurant. And I did that since I was probably 16. I've always had a part-time job. And then when it came time to deciding where and when to go to college, I knew I didn't have enough money. And even with the scholarships that I had gotten so far, the GI Forum had given me a scholarship. I did not have the resources or the information that I really needed to have. So I did talk to a Marine recruiter on the 12th Street and more. I remember walking in there and them making it sound like it was going to be a vacation for me.
Right.
You know, you're going to get to travel the world. I had never been on an airplane. I had never been on true vacation. Like, we'd gone to see some family in Wisconsin. We'd gone to see some family in California. We drove always. But never was I stayed in my little quadrant of South Oklahoma City. And so I remember thinking, if I don't get enough scholarship money to go to OU, I wanted to go to the University of Kansas because they had a great journalism program, I thought, and that was going to be great. Then I will go and join the Marines. And I was working on my 6-minute mile. I had passed the ASVAB scores were there. Yes, we'd love to have you join the Marines.
Make a great Marine.
Yes. And you're going to travel, and you're going to meet the gorgeous man of your dreams as a Marine, and you're going to be on these great places.
And this is in 95.
This is in 95. And I thought, okay, this is going to be plan B. And then it wasn't until I'd applied to OCCC, and I lived kind of close. My parents had lived kind of close over there. I walked in and I applied, and they had came back with this great scholarship. Like, we'll pay for tuition, fees, books, everything for your first 2 years. Then you can transfer to go wherever you want to go. And I'm like, that's my ticket. That's my ticket to college right there. So I immediately went to OCCC, which a lot of minority students typically do, especially first generation ones, when they're starting out at community college. And I had no idea that people don't typically succeed in college if they look like me and they come from my backgrounds. I mean, everybody that told me, you're going to do great in college. I had wonderful advisors. I had people that really understood where I was coming from. People that understood I needed a job while I was in college because I'm going to have to finish paying for the next 2 years of wherever I transfer to. And I needed a strong resume. And I'll never forget Sue Hinton, who came in and just did everything she possibly, who was my journalism advisor, did everything she possibly could to get me an internship at the Oklahoman. I had a job at the student newspaper, which I eventually became editor of. And then I had the criteria when it came time to transfer to go to OU, which I knew that was my next step, was the fact that I had a resume, I had experience, and I had stuff that OU wanted, even as a transfer student, and they came through and offered me a transfer scholarship. So I was able to kind of build my resume enough to where I was attractive as a transfer student, and then I finished my bachelor's degree in about 4.5 years. And I remember the North Oval, I just graduated in December, so just sitting there with my family and thinking, what a great moment. I remember everybody crying.
I can only imagine.
I'm the first person to walk across the stage to get a college degree. And my grandma reminding me that you did this. You're the one that put in the effort. You're the one. And I remember times just thinking, especially as a first generation college student, and not seeing very many people that looked like me in the college classroom, and I mean hardly anybody, especially when I got down to OU. I felt inadequate. I don't belong here. I am not as smart as the rest of these people. And math was difficult.
It can be so overwhelming too with the way professors talk, and you think they know every single thing that has ever happened, and
exactly. You start to just that self-doubt that sits in. And I remember coming and just crying one day to my grandma, and I couldn't pass math. I was just devastated, and I had switched to a different math class, and that one was hard, and I switched to another math class, and I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. And she's like, Madre, I can't help you with your math. But I can see how hard you're working. I can, at that point I was waiting tables. I was working at the newspaper. I had an internship at the South Oklahoma City Leader, which is an old newspaper. I don't know where those archives are, but that might be good. And then she's like, but you bring me your laundry, and I will do your laundry and give you $20 a week for gas money so you can get down to Norman. And it was those things that my family did to kind of push me along that route to getting that college degree is something that I remembered sitting in the North Oval. Like, I would not be here if it wasn't for them. I would not be here. I would not have that community support that you so desperately need, especially when you're a first generation college student. That makes you feel like, and I was just like, I did it. I actually did it. And that celebration of just happiness and knowing that I had broken that cycle. And I think I really realized it. Even since then, since I've been studying, how to assist first generation college students, and that's probably why I chose the career path that I did, was because people believed in me along the way who really understood my circumstances, and who made sure that I had a community, that I had that level of support there. And as most, people like Sue Hinton and people like my grandma and people like Larry Medina, who was down at OU, who was the advisor for Hispanic American Student Association. All of these people came to me like, you can do this. You can run for Miss Hispanic OU, which I did, and I won, and I needed that $500 scholarship. I mean, it was a constant hustle in college, but to pay those bills. But at the same time, I had developed a network of people along the way, and a lot of that might have been through my grandma. A lot of that might have been my own, being out there and engaging with other people. But I have never felt more proud of those individuals whenever I got that college degree, because that really reminded me, hey, these people really made it happen. They called in a couple of favors maybe, and I didn't know anybody down at OU. I hated OU when I got down there. I mean, I left OCCC where I was student newspaper editor.
Yes.
I was meeting with the president every week. I felt like people really cared about whether I succeeded or not. And then I got down to OU in this huge campus where there was really not a lot of people that looked like me. And then eventually Larry Medina helped me find my groups on campus. And it just took somebody to come in and say, hey, you can do this. And I'm going to show you a couple of things around campus. And it's not call in favors, but it's just show support groups and show this individual that people care around this table. To me, that is what meant the most difference in my college career, and so that's what I wanted to be for other students.
It's addressing isolation.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It really. I haven't thought about it like that too much. Just, but yeah, it absolutely is. That lonely feeling can be really harsh sometimes, and if you're and you almost think you're crazy sometimes.
Yes.
And I'm like, I don't think I'm crazy, but maybe I am.
Well, it's kind of square peg round hole thing.
And it wasn't until later when you start really studying higher ed in general, and those institutions were not built for people like me, for women and minority groups in general. You have to really start rethinking why that culture is and what are we doing to help people remove those barriers to get, not only just to get to college, but to be successful.
Stay there. Yeah.
So, and I've loved my work at OCCC, at OU, at OCU. It's just constantly that you're a counselor a lot of the times.
Yes.
You're there to remind people that may not see their parents on a daily basis. You can do this too. You got this. But connecting them to resources that they don't know about. I saw that done for me. I'm going to do it for others. And if that, and probably my grandma sparked that, a lot of it, but there was a lot of people that came through along the way to make sure that I had that college degree. And my best part, some of my best stories are when I was at OCCC, and this was early, I don't know, it's probably been there for about 6 or 7 years. And I ran into a student who was from Bridge Creek. Not a lot of Latinos in Bridge Creek, even back in the early 2000s.
Right.
So I remember him because he came up to me at a Hispanic Chamber event. I'm a senior at Bridge Creek. I would love to go to college. I'm just not sure how. Neither one of his parents had gone to school. Oh, there's my aunt.
Oh, let's bring her in. What's her last name?
Bernie Martinez.
Miss Martinez? Hello. Are you an artist?
Yes.
I used to wait on you all the time at Kinko's.
All right.
I was your number one fan. I remember you well. And I was looking at a piece of your artwork the other day, and I was thinking, this is magical.
And I always just made sure the people knew about my art.
You had to get the color right.
Yes. Yes. You know how I am.
Yes. It is wonderful
And
to
your
see you
name?
again. My name is Carrie Fox.
Carrie.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm glad you know what you're doing in all your aspects, Carrie.
Well, you'll see the copies I made here.
Is this Aunt Pearl's husband?
That's Uncle Jesse.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's Uncle Jesse.
I've never seen that one. And there's this one.
That's Grandpa.
So,
Well, Miss Martinez, just to let you know, I am recording right now. And so we are finishing up an interview. Did you have any final comments that you wanted to share?
I forgot what I was talking about.
We were talking about how you are very motivated to build a support network for first-time college students.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen is from that network is building more, not only support systems at larger higher ed institutions, but you just see a gradual increase of, high school seniors that are Latino going into college in general. The numbers continually build every year. And part of that is through some of the systems, the institutionalized systems that we have put in place, like Oklahoma's Promise, TRIO programs, Project Threshold, all of these specific groups that really help first generation college students and minority students in general. So
and then those students too.
And then those students come back and help other students.
Exactly.
Because my students always came back to recruit. They would go back to Santa Fe South. They would go back to Capitol Hill. They're your Leadership Oklahoma City YLX kids, and you didn't see that back in the day.
No.
So it's nice. It's refreshing to see. Who is that? You know who this is?
Looks like your mother.
I thought so. Like for a
Does it really?
I was like, it ain't my mom.
It's not your
I
mother.
know it's not her, but.
I don't know who that is, but I know if Grandma were here, she'd know it.
Probably.
Well, I thank you so much
Absolutely.
for your time.
Absolutely.
But they're making his park.